Hi, and welcome to the CAFMA Connect. I am Assistant Chief Cody Rose in place of Fire Chief Scott Freitag, who is out doing some of his chiefly duties at a meeting in Prescott. So with me today, I have our fleet manager, Domenic Scaife, with us. Domenic, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for volunteering me today, Cody.
Domenic thought he was going to get out of this for good, and I went and had a conversation with him a few days ago and said, we need to have a podcast, and you need to come join me with it. So, Domenic, thank you for being here. We're going to talk a little bit about the fleet division and what they do within the Central Arizona Fire Medical Authority with the fire. Everybody knows the fire department as firefighters, but you don't know all the other stuff that it entails to make some of those things happen. So, Domenic, let's talk a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you came into the organization, and how long you've been here.
I've been starting on my 21st year with CAFMA / Central Yavapai. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, moved out here when I was a kid, and grew up in Chino Valley. Graduated from Chino High. My last couple years of high school, just trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I had been exposed to a lot of automotive stuff. My grandpa worked for Ford. He had his own garage. So I was kind of always around that and just kind of had a inkling towards the vehicle stuff. As a kid, like all young men, wanted to be a fireman at one point, so that was kind of always something in the back of my mind. But when I was looking at college and things like that, there was an opportunity that came up in high school to take some Yavapai college classes. There was a program that you could do your last 2 years of high school, going to Yavapai, working on your degree, and then when you finished up with high school, you were able to use those for your high school credits, and then have about a year left in school to finish up. So I finished at Yavapai a year after I graduated, and I have my automotive technician certificate and my master's technician certificate. So I was ready to hit the road running and be a mechanic, and I started my first job at a local shop and realized I didn't know what I thought I knew. So just years of on-the-job experience, worked at a couple of shops. Kind of always had that fire thing in the back of my mind. There was a guy that would come by, and little did I know, I ended up being a supervisor for the last 10 years. But he would swing by the different shops I worked in, and he had a truck that said, Fire Department Support Services. And it always kind of caught my eye, and I asked him one day, I'm like, what do you do? And he says, oh, I'm a fire mechanic. And I said, really, how does that work? And he said, well, I started at this shop that you're working at now. And he goes, but then the department had this opening. And he goes, it's a pretty cool gig. He goes, you work on the trucks and that's your main job. But at the same time, if there's a big incident or a fire or something, you can have that training and you can go on those as well. So to me, that kind of caught my eye. But at the same time, I had my career focus and just kind of kept moving forward. And still Charlie would stop by every couple months or whatever and say, hey, we're going to be testing. And that never happened. Nothing ever came to fruition out of it. At one of my jobs I was working at, there was a guy that kind of got under my skin because he'd only show up and work for like 1 or 2 days a week. And the more we started talking, I found out that was just a side gig for him, that he was actually working for Phoenix Fire. And on his days off, he'd come up and work at the shop, and he lived in Prescott. And one day we were just talking, and again, being a younger guy, he said, you got to really look at the future. He goes, start looking at something for benefits for your family, something with retirement, things like that. Yeah, the stuff that we have here. And at the time, it didn't really make a big impression on me. But like he said, in 20 years, you're either going to thank me for this conversation or you're going to be looking back and wish you did something. So at that time, I started looking at the different fire classes at Yavapai College, kind of taking some things. And then Chino Valley all of a sudden started advertising for reserves. I got on as a reserve with Chino. And I remember my first test for a full-time position. It was Chief Tandy at the time. We sat down, did our interview. That all went well. And I don't know if it was the right thing to say or not, but I told him, I said, Chief, I said, I'm kind of at a career path. I got to look and figure out what my options are. I said, if I take this job, I'll be a full-time firefighter. I'll work for Chino, and that's it. I lived right down the road, and I was ready to do it. But at that same time, Central Yavapai opened up a position for fire mechanic. Well, I didn't get the job at Chino. I was still a reserve there, doing that actively. And I tested for the fire mechanic spot. At the time, my experience was all American cars, foreign cars, stuff like that. No heavy diesel experience, no big truck. So I kind of really felt out of my element. I showed up to the testing, and there's trucks everywhere in the parking lot. There's trucks that said Phoenix Support Services. So there was guys from the Valley Testing up here that wanted to live here. Backhoe Repair Services, Dan's Diesel Repair, different places like that. And I looked at it, and it just kind of overwhelmed me. And Chief Wagner at the time, he was running fleet. He met me in the parking lot, and he said, what's going on? And I said, I don't even know if I want to do this. I said, I'm not ready for this. I'm not prepared. And he said, just come in and do the test. He goes, we'll see where it goes. And he goes, you can always come back later on if you don't pass. And he goes, and you never know what's going to happen. Well, I did get that job, and I started out, and it was just like Charlie said. We were doing fleet maintenance out of Station 51 on 6th Street. And at the same time, we were able to go get our Fire 1 and 2. We could go on the fire calls, any of the big incidents. So I kind of got that little feel of the fireman thing that I wanted to do. But I really started focusing more on the fleet stuff. It was probably about 2 years into that where I sat down for my evaluation, and Chief Wagner at the time said, what's your career goals here? And that discussion with Chief Tandy kind of came up in my mind, and I was thinking, it's like this was my shoe-in to get into the department. I was there. I could test for a firefighter spot, move on to the engine, but I really looked at what I could really bring to the district, and I really saw that was going to be my mechanical abilities and stuff like that. So at the time, I said something I didn't really think twice. I said, I want to be in your spot someday. And he looked at me kind of surprised, and he said, really? He said, I'm probably going to be here for 5 or 6 years. He goes, so you got some things you got to do. And I said, well, what's that? And at the time, the departments weren't really focused on education, but he said, you're going to need some management training. You're going to need some office training, stuff like that. So again, I went back to college, got those classes done. There was I forget what the name of it was. It was called the First Cohort Management Group for Working Adults. And it was a whole series of classes that were tailored around nighttime classes, online, a lot of homework stuff. But I was able to fit it into my schedule and do that. And that gave me those skills that I needed, that when that position came up, I was able to advance into that. And I've been managing the fleet for about 12 and a half years now. So that's where I got to where I'm at.
Nice. So you had the thought and the conversations changed you from, a lot of people think I want to be a fireman. When I grow up, I want to be a fireman. And I think a lot of people out there don't understand that the fire department has a lot more than just firefighters on the engines, although that's a very, very important aspect of what we do. But so are the other divisions that we have within them. Fleet services, which is what you manage, is very, very important to keep our trucks running and make sure that everything's okay so that we don't have a major breakdown on a fire scene or on a call or whatever that is. So
yeah,
let's talk a little about fleet. So tell me how many people you have in fleet and some of the experience levels you have there and kind of what they do, and then we'll get into what we do.
Okay. So I have 4 mechanics in fleet right now. We have 3 different positions. One of them is an entry-level mechanic position. And then we have an intermediate, and then we have our 3rd position, which is master technician. So currently I have 1 person in the beginning spot. That's Brighton Birch. He's been there for a couple years. He's a Yavapai College graduate also through their welding and diesel program. And then I have Travis Kohler is a mechanic 3. He's my senior mechanic. He's been on for about 6 years. And Travis came from UTI. He's a UTI grad. And then I have Chris Peckham, who's also a UTI grad. He's been on for about 4 years. And then just recently we hired Gerald Schiffmacher. He had 20 years experience in the fleet down in the city of Peoria. And then his last couple of years were in wastewater. So we have a pretty well-rounded crew, experience in fabrication. Even like Gerald working in water, a lot of the hydraulics and pump systems and stuff are similar to what we use on the fire trucks. So all these guys come in, not necessarily being fire mechanics and knowing how to work on the fire trucks, but their on-the-job experience over the years really ties into what they're doing now.
Yeah. And I can tell you from my experience, so I've been in my position for 2 years and overseeing this. A lot of what I thought fleet did at the time was work on trucks and make sure everything works. But we'll get Type 6 brush trucks, which are F550s or Dodges, whatever they are, but they're 1 ton or 1.5 ton trucks. We'll get those in and they'll build the beds for them and fabricate all that and put that all together. And it's very, very nice once that's done. It takes a bit of time to get that done, but the end product is a lot better than us just ordering that, bringing it in and bolting it on a flatbed.
Yeah. And looking at those, we actually have one of those in the budget this year. And if you just go to a dealer and you buy a Type 6 ready to go, you're going to spend $230,000 for that truck. Yeah. Doing it in-house, obviously we have our labor costs, but we can build that same truck for about $120,000, $130,000.
Yeah.
So we save quite a bit doing in-house work.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into fire trucks. So Type 1 engines. We recently purchased 3 Type 1 engines, and we switched our manufacturers from Rosenbauer, which we were using previously, to Pierce engines. So let's talk a little bit about that switch and why we made that call and then where we're at in that process.
Okay. For years, the departments around here, we used a brand called Central States Fire Apparatus. They're a good truck. They build a very quality product. They were bought out by Rosenbauer America, which was a European company that wanted to make its footprint in the States. We have purchased probably about 10 frontline apparatus that are from Rosenbauer. Again, a quality product. But what we started seeing was some of the quality control issues. We worked with the factory. We had many meetings with them, emails back and forth, trying to resolve those. But every truck that was coming in seemed to have the same problems. Again, under new management, looking over fleet, we're really trying to focus on sticking on fleet maintenance and repairs, and we shouldn't be having to fix brand new trucks that come in that are broken.
Yeah.
So that's where we decided we're going to put a committee together and start looking at different apparatus and see if we could find a new builder that would meet our needs.
Yeah. And that's when we went. We looked at several different builders and different apparatus, and Pierce was the one that we decided on. So those 3 apparatus that are on order, talk a little bit about those and where they're at in the build process.
Okay. So right now they're on order. The contract was signed in October, and we have a pre-construction meeting, which will be in April. And at that meeting, basically myself, Chief Rose, and then one of the people from the apparatus committee will go back to the factory in Appleton, Wisconsin. We'll sit down with the product engineers, our salesperson, and we have a spec formulated. It's a big 3-ring binder that has all the details of that truck, from the chassis, what types of brakes would be on it, engine, transmission, pump and plumbing, body compartments. And we'll sit down with them and make sure that what we specified is something they can build. In the previous manufacturer, we would have that meeting, and that was right after we signed our contract. This is going to be 6-7 months after we signed that contract, which I was kind of thinking was putting us behind the 8 ball. Talking to Pierce, the trucks are already being built right now as we sit here. Chassis should be almost completed, and then they cut all the panels out. They put them onto a cart with all of our products. And when we go back there for that pre-construction, if there's any changes we want to make, they'll be able to pull those parts out, make the changes, and then as we leave, those pieces go in for paint and then assembly, and the truck should be completed around November, December.
Okay.
At that time, we would go back and do a pre-delivery inspection, which again, we go through our entire spec, make sure everything is built to our satisfaction. If there's things that aren't up to par, then we can make those changes before the trucks are delivered, and then we get the apparatus that we ordered delivered to us.
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk about one of the major changes that we had with these new trucks prior to the Rosenbauers, but switching to Pierce, we also made a major change in the SCBAs and where they're located in the truck.
Yes. It's a topic of contention in the fire service, but the clean cab design is basically trying to move any of the fire equipment that could be exposed to fire carcinogens out of the cab. It's basically a cancer prevention. So the air packs, which are the packs that go on the back of the firefighters, the SCBAs, those are being moved out of the cab. That's one of the big changes, which basically was going to take up more space in the body where we store our tools, hose, different equipment like that. So we basically reconfigured the entire truck in order to facilitate that. The trucks will pretty much match up with what we have. They're going to be the same drivetrain, Cummins 15-liter diesel, Allison transmission, and a Hale 1500 GPM pump. But the body will be a little bit different. It's a rescue body, so it'll have coffin compartments, which are large compartments on the top of the truck. They'll go from the front of the body to the back. That'll allow us to move a lot of equipment from the main truck body to the top of the truck, and thus give us room for the SCBAs.
Yeah. And on that committee that we have a total of 3 other engineers from CAFMA, along with myself and Domenic on that committee. So we've met and we've talked about this for several months and before we made a final decision on that. And one of the other things we're going to do when those trucks get here and we're getting ready to put them into service, we're going to get all the equipment that goes on that truck, and being that it's different and we're going to have to move some things around, we'll put that on the ground, bring that committee back together as well as a few other folks that work on those trucks regularly, and let those folks figure out where's all this equipment going to go and what changes are we going to make, because we want to be consistent across the district, and making this change is going to change some of that consistency, but it will make that change with some of the other trucks as well.
Yeah, and then as trucks get replaced in the future, those trucks will match our newest specification that we're building.
Yeah. And then how many Type 1 engines do we have that are first out in the reserves, and what's the plan, not specifically where these new ones are going, but what's the plan of moving this, shuffling all this around? How do we get rid of those old ones that we don't want anymore?
So we have 11 frontline engines, and then we have a fleet of 4 reserve engines. Basically what we try to do is put those new engines somewhere where we're going to maximize the mileage while they're under warranty, and then what we'll do is we'll move older engines to other locations. Some of our geographical areas require apparatus with a smaller wheelbase so they can turn around in areas. We do have some apparatus throughout the years that have been purchased with a longer wheelbase. Those are not adequate to move into those areas. So what we're going to do is take some of our newer apparatus that just expired on warranty, move those into those areas such as 63 and 57, which would be Paulden and Williamson Valley. And those apparatus will be there for a longer period of time because they run less mileage. As of right now, and I tell the guys this could change at any time, but the locations for the new trucks would be Station 51, which is our engine that we run in Prescott, Station 54, which is down in Dewey, and then also Station 62, which is in Chino Valley on Road 2. That also gives each of the battalions a truck with that clean cab design so that the firefighters can start getting acclimated to that and using those trucks with the SCBAs in the compartments outside of the truck versus inside the cab.
Yeah. And then we'll move. Well, one of the conversations we had with 57 and 63 are two of our slowest stations in the district. And on a regular basis, I would say every 2 or 3 years, they were getting a new truck. So one of the things Domenic and I talked about was how can we avoid them from getting a new truck every 2 or 3 years and get them a truck, and they're going to keep that. Maybe it's 5 or 6 or 7 years now. So that's one of the things we're going to work on trying to do and get them a newer truck that they can have for a longer period of time and not having to switch back and forth regularly. So. Okay, so that's where we're at with our 3 new Type 1 engines that are on order from Pierce. And let's move on to our rescues. So obviously we know this is a hot topic. Chief Freitag has talked about this many times on previous podcasts, but we're going to talk about the actual rescues that we have now, not the whole process and where we're at with that, but the rescues, where we at with those, and what's the plan moving forward.
Okay. So CAFMA just recently purchased 3 new rescue units. 2 of those are built by Medic's ambulance. One of those is going to be an F450 4-wheel drive, and the other one is a Dodge 4500 2-wheel drive. The third ambulance is from Wheeled Coach, and that's going to be a F450 4-wheel drive also. Out of the combination of rescues that we purchased, there's different wheelbases. So again, going back to those areas, and again, the Chino Valley area has a lot of areas back in that are hard to get to, tighter spots. So we're going to put the shorter wheelbase units out in those stations, and then the longer wheelbase units will be in Battalion 6, which is Prescott Valley, Dewey, and such. Out of this also, we'll have 1 4-wheel drive and 1 2-wheel drive unit in each battalion as well. That way, with the inclement weather, we can get a 4-wheel drive into people where we wouldn't be able to get a 2-wheel drive in.
Yeah. And those stations that those are going to be stationed at is Station 58, Station 53 in Battalion 3, and then Station 62 and Station 61 in Battalion 6,
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay. And then as far as getting those into service, what do you think we're at in time frame as far as that?
It's kind of a combined effort when we get those trucks in. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. These came pretty ready to go. It's a new process for us because we haven't had rescue units before, so there's a learning curve in fleet. Some of the new equipment, such as the gurney units in the back that slide into the truck, there's a system where that mounts in and it holds it in place. Those have to be installed. That's brand new to us. We're just getting the first one installed. I believe you said one of the rescue units comes with that already in it.
Yeah.
And then we also have a unit that we purchased from Northwest Fire, which is it's ready to go. We're doing a restripe on that. Currently, we have one of the trucks striped. One of them is at the shop getting striped, and another one is having all the decals removed. We're probably still looking at the March timeframe to get those in, and then we're waiting on that third new ambulance to come in.
Yeah, okay. And the Northwest ones probably should be done by next week because we're not doing anything else other than the striping, right?
Yeah.
So that when that comes back for everybody out there, when that one comes back, that's when you go into Station 53. Previously, that was at Station 58, but Station 58 is getting one of the new ones. So that one's going to be coming to Station 53 when it's done, and hopefully that's by next week. And the goal is we can get those done as soon as possible. We're shooting for middle of March timeframe. The biggest holdup right now is our gurneys and when we can get those. But middle of March timeframe is the goal. And then we can get the Mesa Fire units that we've been on loan and borrowed from them for the last several months. We can get those back to those folks so that they can use those because they're going to actually put those back in service in Mesa because they're expanding their program down there. So that's where we're at with our rescues. You should see some pictures of those probably coming up next week. We'll have the striping done and kind of where we're at in that process. You can look for that in Chief's Freitag's review. Okay, staff vehicles. Let's talk about staff vehicles. We have several of those out there. I think it's over 30 that we have now, but we were planning to order 5 or 6 of those in this fiscal year that we're in now, and we ran into an issue with that.
Yeah. Just
Jonah's upset because he was getting one of those, but we ran into an issue
last year too.
We're trying to find him a Ford Focus, but those aren't even available either.
I
So
was over Geo Metro. They still make those.
we might have to go electric. You're gonna get an electric car.
Yeah, just like anything out there, supply has been horrendous. The chip shortages, trying to get chassis has been an issue. We had vehicles on order. We got an email back from Chrysler that Ram was not going to be producing any government contract vehicles this year. So basically, all staff vehicles for last year have been bumped into the 22-23 budget, along with more staff vehicles that we were planning on replacing. So hopefully everything clears up and we can get those rolling next year. We did have a warehouse delivery vehicle, which is a Isuzu NPR with a box body on it and a lift gate. We're still trying to work on that. I do have a couple contacts I'm working with, and we may be able to find something out of state to bring in for that still this fiscal year.
Yeah. Okay, and that's one of the things that as we have to keep pushing these things off, it just keeps compounding and compounding because we have other things that are in our capital replacement plan to be purchased. So as we keep pushing these off, it just the next year's purchase gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So hopefully we can get those done. And for the folks out there that are not Dodge fans, just so you know, we have looked at some of the blue ovals that Chief Freitag's not very fond of, and maybe some of the Chevrolets. And the issue is across the board with the chips. It's not just with the Dodge or Chrysler. It's with manufacturers in general. So we're trying to get that done. And those vehicles that we had to push off one of those was for our tech services division manager, and then the other ones were for our prevention division. So those hopefully we can get those purchased in this next fiscal year and move on with that process. What else do we got? Programs. Oh, we moved some programs from the fleet division. So again, trying to streamline some of the things that we do and simplify the processes for folks out there that are on the ground and doing the work when they need something, or they have an issue that they know right where to go to. And that's kind of been difficult before because I don't know if the warehouse does that or does fleet do that. And so we're trying to simplify that to where if it's something you have to order or buy, it comes from the warehouse. So let's talk about some of the stuff that we moved from fleet to the warehouse.
Yeah, so like Cody was saying, over the years we've developed other divisions within the department. For years, fleet took care of all fleet and equipment needs. Again, repairing everything, the SCBA program, flow testing and repairs, extrication equipment, tick cameras. The list kind of goes on and on. Now we've established a solid warehouse program. Tech services is available for things. So what we really looked at was how do we best use our mechanics? And that came down to they should be focusing on fleet and fleet maintenance and not all these different equipment programs. So instead of hiring more mechanics to keep taking care of that stuff, we've been able to focus on bringing new personnel into the warehouse and moving some of those programs over. The warehouse makes deliveries every week. So all fluids were moved out of fleet other than the stuff we use. So oils and antifreeze, DEF, all of that stuff is delivered by the warehouse to the stations. Recently, we're working on transitioning the SCBA program over there. Josh went through his training, so he's going to be certified to flow test the air packs. Travis Kohler is the manager of that in fleet, and he's been working with the warehouse to transition that program over. Last week, we were able to move everything from fleet over there, and they're getting that set up and rolling with it. Ladder testing has been moved over. So if any of the guys on the engines need a ladder or something gets damaged, that comes directly from the warehouse. And again, they have that availability to deliver that anytime during the week, where in the past when fleet did it, we'd struggle to get out into the field, grab that ladder, bring it in and fix it. So it's really streamlining those processes, getting the firefighters their equipment faster as long as they follow the processes.
Yeah. And it's getting them to learn those processes, and that takes time. We understand that because the firefighters don't do that every day where they have an issue with a ladder, they have an issue with SCBA. But when it comes up, the instinct or what I've done the last 5, 10, 15 years is call fleet, and they take care of it because that's what it's always been. So changing that over a little bit to the warehouse, and because they do those deliveries, they'll have these delivery vehicles that they can get that taken care of. And we're not pulling mechanics off of working on engines or build processes to go do that because that delays our time frame.
And a perfect example of that, one of the other programs we moved recently was the saw program. So every frontline engine has a chainsaw and a K12 saw, which is a circular saw. Those were all taken care of by fleet. The saws would pile up broken. I'd try to pull somebody off of a project. They'd dedicate a couple hours to fixing those. And now moving that to the warehouse has a chainsaw and a circular saw in stock. Something breaks on the engines, they call the warehouse. That saw is delivered to them. The other saw is dropped off at Fleet, and then we're utilizing the local able saw to fix those saws for us. And again, it takes away that time the mechanics were spending on it, and really the cost is lower than paying in-house personnel to do it.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things Domenic and I talked a lot about was time on task. And we may take one of the mechanics off to go to one of the stations to fix something that could have been fixed on its when we bring it in to do everything else on it and do that full repair or the full assessment on it. But if they want them to go out there and it takes 30 minutes to fix it, well, it takes 30 minutes to get there. It takes 30 minutes to get back. And then when they get back, they got to remember where they were on that task. So that whole process extends that to maybe it's 2 or 3 hours that we lost on that engine or whatever that apparatus was that they were working on prior to that. So I think that's helped a lot of streamlining those processes, like Domenic had said, and then trying to make things easier on guys that are working on these trucks. And the folks in the warehouse have done a great job. Eric and his team over there have done a great job expanding the warehouse from where it was even when I started 2 years ago. And I think we still have a lot to go. There's a lot to build on over there, and the warehouse is just going to keep getting better and better with the team that's there. So trucks that we have. So we currently have, if everything's out and nothing's broke down, we're doing great. We have 4 reserve apparatus. Let's talk about those, where they're at, and then if the guys have to switch from one of their frontline engines into one of those reserves, that process and what they need to do to make that work out smoothly.
Yes. So that kind of goes back to just what Chief Rose was saying, time on task. In the past, whenever we would bring a truck in for service, the mechanics would grab a reserve truck. They would take it to the station. The crew may be out on a call. They may be busy doing something else, and the mechanic would wait there while they swapped out. The crew felt in a rush. They would forget equipment, different things. So working with Chief Rose and Chief Fatima, we came up with a new process. And again, if any of the guys are watching, this is what we're supposed to follow. We're keeping 2 reserve trucks at Fleet, and we have 1 reserve truck in each battalion. One is stationed at Carta, and one's at Station 61 in the storage bay. And we'll basically call the stations up, talk to the captain after we've ran it by the battalion chief, and we'll say, your truck's due for service. Please go swap out onto reserve engine E661. At their earliest convenience, or when they're done with the call, they can go out of service. They can pull up to that location. They can take their time, swap their equipment off, make all their notes, and then they call Fleet, and they say, our engine's available over at Carta or Station 61. At that time, somebody can leave Fleet, go pick it up, bring it right back, and get right back on task. It's a change. Some of the guys like it, some of them don't. But again, it's focusing more on keeping us on our job and then not getting all those little phone calls that, hey, we forgot this on the truck. Hey, we forgot this, or sorry, we missed the swap out. It just takes care of a lot of issues. Yeah. So far, it's been working really good.
And then how does it work for those 2 reserve apparatuses that are at Fleet?
So there are going to still be times where the station's going to be due for service, and maybe we can't get them to go to one of those stations. We can go and take that engine, and we can do the old process and swap them out. But again, the stations may be called and told to come to Fleet, swap out there, and it's that same process. We'll pull that reserve engine out of the bay. They can take their time swapping it out, make sure they get all their appropriate equipment, and then the truck's there at Fleet ready for the mechanics to work on.
Okay. And again, like Domenic is talking about it, we're just trying to streamline processes and improve our time on task as much as we can. We don't want people running all over the place when there's a lot of work that can be done within the shop. So if we can keep them in there and get some of that stuff done, we can get stuff in and out a lot quicker than when they're out of the shop. Let's talk about staff vehicles and vehicles, doing truck checks on those vehicles and maintaining those vehicles. What's that look like, and how should that be handled?
So far, everything's been pretty good on that. Truck checks are done weekly at all the stations on frontline apparatus. Staff vehicles are bi-weekly. Staff vehicles can always use some improvement. It's pretty hard for everybody just to remember to do that on a bi-weekly basis. One of the things I've told my guys is to schedule that on the payroll week. You have a vehicle that you got to take care of. That's part of your benefit package. You're getting paid that week, and it just kind of reminds them turn in your bi-weekly. On the frontline apparatus at the stations, they do a really good job on getting that done every week. The only pointer I would give is to remember that truck check is for Fleet use only. Tech Services does not get a copy of that. The warehouse does not get a copy. A lot of times we'll get little write-ups that the radio's not working or a headset's not working, chainsaw won't start. Again, those things need to go to those divisions, whether it's the warehouse or Tech Services. That truck check is for Fleet only, and issues with the vehicle.
Okay. And one of the things that I've talked about with each one of the division managers, and kind of a pet peeve of mine, is the these trucks are being paid for by the taxpayers, and we're fortunate enough to have these vehicles that we can drive back and forth. A lot of us drive them home. We need to keep them clean. That's our professionalism within the community, and wherever we go outside of the community, that CAFMA has staff vehicles, and they take very good care of them because they're clean inside and out. So one of the things that I try to push on division managers and their people is make sure these vehicles that are CAFMA vehicles that you're fortunate enough to have, take care of them and keep those clean. That's all I have. You have anything else? I'm sure you want to talk some more. We've been into this for 30 minutes. It's very cold outside, and this week we've gotten some snow. And Eric Crossman's been able to use his plow this week, and he begged for that thing. He came from New York, and he begged for that thing, and he got it. So this is going to be the second time that he can move that thing and push some of the snow, the 1 inch of snow or 2 inches that we have there. So thank you, Domenic. Thank you for coming in, and thank you, folks, for watching. And next week you should have Chief Freitag back. And whenever he's gone again doing his chiefly duties, I'm sure it'll be myself or Chief Fedema filling in for him. So have a great weekend. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.